Jupiter effect and Venus, both of these are sort of the benefics in astrology, and they seem to bring relatively good times, whereas the malefics in astrology are the two, Saturn and Mars. And it will depend very much where you've got these placed in your chart, how a lot of these things unravel. But basically, this is a dialogue between these two planets. And I'm personifying the dialogue in a lot of artwork and pictures and things like that. So you've got this idea of Beauty and the Beast, and probably people know the story about, you know, the transformation process. When you recognize the dark parts of yourself, they suddenly change into something a bit more acceptable type of thing. So it's Beauty and the Beast is, you know, the history behind that particular fairy tale is to do with more with Victorian marriages. And often, you know, young daughters would be married to older, uglier gentry or well-to-do men. So, you know, Beauty and the Beast, it was the acceptance of these sort of restrictive situations that was part of that Beauty and the Beast mythology. So yeah, as we walk through, you'll see kind of how these ideas develop as we go. Now, if I can get the next one. Good. Okay, so yeah, just continuing on that theme, this is one of the Botticelli series. You know, he did the Venus, and this particular one's called Pallas and the Centaur. And they were made for the Medici family in sort of medieval Italy. And you see Pallas or Athene there on the right. And, you know, she's kind of comforting the head of the centaur. Now, it's a kind of juxtaposition of things that from the first slide, because the centaurs are obviously, you know, half man, half beast type of figures, but they're also very much related to Jupiter in mythology. And if anybody knows anything about Chiron, the wounded healer, so the centaurs are the teachers of these. The centaurs taught the Greek heroes like Achilles and Hercules and various other sort of the Greek hero type of figures. And so this kind of moves the figures around a wee bit. And it's kind of interesting to just look at what the dialogues are between these two planets. And so here's the traditional image of Saturn here. So it's very much the devil image. The beast has been transformed into the devil figure in the tarot here. And you can see he's chained these two figures in front of him, this duality of things. But you can also see that the two figures that are chained can actually lift the chains and walk away. So it's this idea of being chained to an illusion of something that isn't quite as it should be. So Saturn is really about the deeper understanding of the darker parts of ourselves, is really what this one is saying. And so it's not necessarily something to be feared, but it often does bring, you know, a descent or a journey into the underworld in people's charts and in the way that people see Saturn. And here's the alternative figure here that kind of comes to our rescue a wee bit. This is the Emperor figure, and he or she is a Jupiterian figure, you know, beneficent and ruling over a wide landscape sort of idea. This particular one's from one of the herbal tarots that we use, because we're quite involved in a lot of the gardening things. So it's a lot of interesting information that's packed into these cards. And I think I've got a few more of them in the slides as well. But it's just to give you an idea as we look through what Jupiter's about. You know, Jupiter is about the expansion of the consciousness, the opening up of things and unfolding of potential. Whereas Saturn is really about the opposite. It's about, you know, here we've got him here clipping the wings of Cupid. You know, so when things get a wee bit too amorous or too out of hand, or too much playtime type of thing, Saturn comes in and clips the wings. So Saturn's this old sort of father time image, always depicted with the sickle. And of course, Cupid is a Venus representative, is kind of often seen with the goddess Venus. So that's a kind of other area of opening, because Venus is one of the beneficence in astrology. And so Cupid as a representative, this might be seen as a Saturn conjunct Venus type of thing, as some people will have in their chart. So it's always good to look in your own chart and see where Saturn is and how it's placed, because that's where you'll find a lot of restrictions and limitations going on, and then open a dialogue as to how to unpack these limitations and restrictions, or how to bring them into your conscious awareness. And that's really what the art and imagery is about. It's about trying to kind of open things up rather than close them down. So yeah, Saturn often is seen as, this one, three of swords. It's times of sorrow or grief or loss, and but these times are sort of unavoidable. But it's how you manage that, how your heart feels. You can see, this heart here pierced with 3 swords, but you have to unpack a bit more of the picture to see what this is kind of talking about here. The clouds and rain in the background are a wee bit interesting, because as we move into the sort of theme of Aquarius later on, we'll see a bit more of this coming to light. So here again, to rescue us from any issues is the sage, or the wise person, the high priest. And you can see him between the 2 pillars of the temple here, holding the Egyptian ankh. And I think that's the sage plant that's in front of him. And of course, so sage is a plant that's sacred to Jupiter. So if you want to do a bit of work with Jupiter in your chart, then sage is a good plant to start with. Cultivate a bit of sage and try and work with it, and rub the scent of it. And I think it's used in incense type of things as well, sage for smudging and all that kind of things. It's got beautiful flowers as well. So yeah, sage is a good plant to work with there. So the 3s are often associated with Saturn, and with in Kabbalistic lore, it's with Bina, or the Great Mother. And so this particular 3 is the 3 of Cups, and it's often seen in the Greek mythology as the 3 Graces, sort of daughters of Jupiter. So it's a kind of, while the 3 of Swords is a sorrow sort of idea, the 3 of Cups is a joy, a celebration of things. And so Jupiter's bringing us the desire to have a celebration or a joy with what we're doing, and express ourselves a bit more openly and expansively, whereas Saturn's kind of trying to keep that under control in case it gets a bit too out of hand. So what we've been experiencing this last long period is Saturn has been in this sign of Capricorn, which it rules. In astrology, it's the ruler of Capricorn. And Saturn will spend 2.5 to 3 years in a sign. So if you're a Capricorn person, like I know 1 or 2 people are here, you'll have felt the kind of weight or responsibility of Saturn moving through your sign for the last 2 or 3 years. And yeah, it depends how you work with Saturn in your chart, whether it's been a burden or a bonus. But Jupiter, on the other hand, it will only spend 1 year in a sign. And in this particular one, it came into Capricorn at the beginning of this year. And it's traveled through Capricorn, and it's caught up with Saturn. But Jupiter is said to have, it's not in a great placement in Capricorn, as you can imagine, because it's facing the opposite qualities that it would normally embrace. It's facing these limitations, restrictions, kind of, it's out of its comfort zone. So this last year has been a bit of a battle between the two, and it's been more of a pessimistic sort of outlook rather than an optimistic one. But you know what's happening just now. Everybody's probably quite well aware of it. That at the winter solstice, which is quite unusual this time round. So exactly on the winter solstice, Saturn and Jupiter are coming together in a very close conjunction, or the very limited distance apart. In fact, you know, if you put your finger up at arm's length, if you're staring out to the sky, the width of your finger is the kind of separation that will be between the two. So it's less than a degree. And if you wonder what a degree is, the size of the moon in the sky is a degree, and so is the size of the sun. That's 1 degree of size in the sky, if you like. So you'll see that it's less than half of that when they're conjuncting or when they're coming together. And this particular one here, the sun, it's quite an interesting card, this one. Angelica, one of these herbs that is quite a solar herb here. And yeah, it's got a kind of Egyptian feel to it as well, this one, because it's got the hands of Akhenaten on it as well. So yeah, so winter solstice, it's a big time. There's a few other things happening just coincidentally at the same time at the winter solstice. And one of the things is that Saturn moves into Capricorn. That is what determines the solstice. But moving in at the same time as Mercury. So Mercury is this messenger kind of character in the mythology. So he brings the information, he or she brings the information in with her, and kind of lets the information be circulated and as to what's happening and how things are unfolding. So it's a kind of planned entry, if you like. So we'll speak a bit more about that a bit later, but yeah, that should be interesting, that it's all happening on the same day. And what astrologers do is they kind of draw up a chart, it's a bit like divination or dowsing, where you draw up a horoscope for the event on that day. So, you know, I looked at, and some of the other astrologers have looked at the horoscope for Saturn and Jupiter moving in on the exact time of the winter solstice. And it gives you a bit more information about the likely outcomes or the likely patterns that it's going to unfold, the potential of it in the year ahead. So yeah, again, we'll come to a bit more about that as we go through this. So winter solstice, I just put this slide in here. I should have a New Grange one, and I think I've got that somewhere else as well. But this is the tomb, Halley's tomb at Largs. And it faces out to the kind of southwest, probably aligned much more with the midwinter sunset down at the bottom end of Arran from where we are here. And it's interesting, you know, the ancients, I mean, this is what, 3,000 more, yeah, probably more than that, probably 4,000 or 5,000 years old. And the alignments, you know, they set up to bring the light in or to celebrate the light at the winter solstice. So they were very much aware of planetary movements and the likely outcomes of not doing it as well as doing it, celebrating what's to be done. So we'll kind of jump about a wee bit here, but this is one of the diagrams, Copernican system, where the sun is at the center of the universe here, and you can see the planets going around the sun, Mercury, Venus, and then the Earth with the moon circulating around the Earth, and then out to Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and the fixed stars out beyond that. And that's a kind of familiar thing to us, but before this, you know, this chap, Tycho Brahe, and one or two others were working, Kepler, were working on a system to take it away from the geo system. That means the Earth-centered view of the universe. You know, so up until, yeah, kind of, well, that's in the 1560s, but I think up until the kind of period of enlightenment, if you like, it was thought that the Earth was the centre of everything and everything moved around it. So there are these elaborate systems drawn out to try and time out events, astronomical and astrological events, because the science of astronomy was tied in with the science of astrology. So it's quite interesting at that time what thoughts and ideas they had. And it leads us on to the chap that, again, I think the Dowsers have had a few talks on these sort of things, Kepler's theories, Johannes Kepler, and he brings us into this concept of the trigons. And this is the conjunctions of Saturn, Jupiter, how they happen and how frequently they happen and how they change. So you can see the diagram here. One cycle of this is moving from where I've got my arrow up here, and it'll move down here, and then it'll move across here, and then it'll complete the triangle back. Now it takes 60 years to complete that triangle. So each part of that is 20 years. So you read that these are 20-year cycles that we have, where Saturn and Jupiter both come together. Not as close as they are just now, but they both come together every 20 years. And if you look at the dates that are on here, you'll see there's a 60-year period between each of these three dates on each of the points of the triangles. So these are the trigons, what they call the trigons. And you'll also hear that this is a more elaborate figure of the trigons as it goes around the great conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter. It's a great conjunction because the big slow-moving planets, and there's Kepler down there, 1571 to 1630, and it shows a sequence of these trigons, and what it's saying is 20-year, but what they have is you get a triple conjunction. And basically that means this conjunction happens backwards and forwards 3 times in the 1 year. And that's what's happened this year. And that's what makes this year a bit more significant in astronomical and astrological terms. The fact that we've had 3 goes of this, you know, during the earlier part of the year, the spring, the sort of summer part, and then now, you know, so this is the third and last meeting of the 2 planets in the conjunction as they change sign. And you'll see just on the outer rim of this, here's the signs here. There's Gemini, and there's Taurus, and there's Aries. Now what's happening is that it's been down here, it's been working its way through Capricorn. So the first conjunction would be back. Well, let's start at the last conjunction. So the last conjunction's here, and that would be now. And the time before that would be 20 years before that, and the time before that would be 20 years before that. So I've kind of made a list of what times these are, which I've got somewhere beside me. So if you go back in 20-year cycles, you kind of see what kind of ideas and what kind of things they bring. So typically, I think the last one, this is 2021. So the last one, 2020 to 2021. So the last one would be the year 2000, and probably lasting into a bit of 2001. And, you know, you can look up all the things that people can look up what happened then in their own lives and see how it compares to what's happening just now. But, you know, 2000, 2001, there was quite a lot happening, actually. The change into the new century would be a lot. But 2001 was, you know, the big change really in the 9/11 disaster, wasn't it? You know, the Twin Towers and things like that. So, yeah, that was a kind of major thing. And it changed, you know, it changed the way that we do business. It changed our travel. It changed everything else. So Jupiter's the kind of lord of travel as well. And then if you go back before the 2000 and 2001 one, you go back to 1981, And that conjunction was in the sign of Libra, which is another cardinal sign, so it's another quite hard-hitting sign. Now, I'm not sure, I haven't looked up all the details of what happened in 1981, but probably quite a lot, actually. I did take a few notes of them, but people can probably cast their minds back to them. I know that was around my own Saturn return, and I was asking Nancy what happened then, and she said that's when we got married, so that was probably, I should have remembered that a bit better. That was 1981. So if you go back another 20 years spell before that, you come back to 1961. So those of us that can go back and see what was happening in 1961, yeah, quite a lot again, limitations and restrictions. 1961, that was the lead up to, the precursor to the Vietnam War and the communism, and I think John F. Kennedy, so yeah, there was a lot going on in 1960. Big world-changing events that were happening, and I'm sure there was a lot of other things as well. But it's probably relevant to do a bit more research on these things and find out exactly what was happening there. So the big thing is that we're moving from this earthy, long period of earthy conjunctions, if you like, Capricorn and Taurus and Virgo conjunctions. And Saturn here, you see him in his chariot with his sickle there and his winged dragons on the clouds. He's moving into Aquarius. And so this is the beginning of a bigger cycle. It's not just a 20-year cycle. It means that all the conjunctions for the next couple of 100 years are going to take place in air signs rather than in earthy signs. So it's going to be affecting all the concepts that are governed by the air element, if you like, which could be a lot of things, but probably the most important one to us all is our oxygen supply and our carbon dioxide emissions. So the greenhouse gases and the chance that we've got to fix the air signs within the next 20 years, because that's really, from a science point of view, that's really all that the time that the Earth has got left, unfortunately, for fixing the problem of the increased carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, because of it's already, it's already above 1 degree centigrade above its normal temperature. So in 20 years' time, if hugely drastic action isn't taken by all countries, then the temperature is likely to be 3 degrees centigrade above the normal, and that will be pretty catastrophic. So yeah, this particular cycle of air signs is probably going to be the most important one that's taken place in anybody's lifetime. So here's the accompanying one, this sort of Jupiterian slide here, where the river god Ladon is down there with the water pouring into the river, but he's very much an Aquarian type of figure, and the figure Apollo chasing, chasing a sort of Daphne type of figure, and she's been turned into a laurel bush. So there's a lot of the Greek mythology is full of transformative information, and the Cupid figure above him, and he's a shapeshifter. Jupiter and Apollo are kind of shape-shifting figures, shamanic type of figures, and you'll notice in all the mythology that they appear in hundreds of different guises, but they're very procreative characters, and they're responsible for great changes happening and happening rapidly. So here's another diagram of Jupiter, and it's a Roman one, Jupiter Ammon. Ammon is from Ammon-Re, the Egyptian god as well. So, of course, Greece was in Egypt for a long time as well. So they blended a lot of their cultures. But I thought it was a very good image of Jupiter, you know, not just as a kind of emperor type of figure, but, you know, showing the shamanistic animal type of side with the horns, and the Pan relationship as well. There in this one. Here's a more traditional one, the kind of red vase paintings, and yeah, Jupiter in the middle here. And this is him holding his sort of thunderbolt, which looks like a plant, in his right hand there, sitting on his throne. And that's his partner, Hera, who is the female Jupiter. So she's equally powerful and controls things in a manner equal to Jupiter. So Hera is a very important goddess figure in it. And behind him is the Apollo figure with his lyre. So it's representative of the sun. So Jupiter, the sort of solar energies coming out there, but the whole picture is being controlled by Hera, who's got this blue flower lotus or lotus figure that she's sprinkling on Jupiter. So yeah, just going back again, Roman stuff, and you've got the figure of Saturn here, a more traditional image holding a sickle. You don't see the sickle blade there, but he's kind of, because originally it was an agricultural figure. And it's about reaping, you know, taking in the harvest at the end of the year. So the reaper of souls, or the reaper of rewards, as well as that. So yeah, quite an interesting kind of figure that isn't as dark as you think, you know. And just another illustration of this is it goes back a long time in mythology. So this is an ancient Sumerian or Babylonian one, where you've got several kind of different figures here. So in the center here, the character in the center with these fishes and water pouring from him, this is the god Enki, and he's a sort of Saturnian figure, and because he's a very watery god and in charge of the evolution of things, in charge of the big changes, but he's also quite a Jupiterian figure. So the other figures here is this character down here with his knife or his sword is actually the sun, and is cutting his way through the mountain to rise at dawn. You know, so there's a lot of mythology, a lot of stories in each of these pictures, but it's just to give you an idea of the interaction of the forces that we're talking about in this picture of the two. So Rome, I haven't actually been here, but I didn't quite make it to Rome or this temple, but I'd quite like to go here. Obviously quite an impressive, if anybody has been to Rome, or if anybody in the group here has been to the particular temple of Saturn, yeah, it looks very impressive. So Saturn is of course the Jupiter, the Roman side of the Greek god. So the Greek god would be, the equivalent would be Kronos, the sort of Time Lord. And Jupiter, the Greek god equivalent, would be Zeus. So the figure that we looked at before is a Zeus figure, you know, not just, so yeah, these are all kind of Zeus figures here. The hermit, I think, this is an interesting one, because what I'm trying to do in the talk and in a lot of the astrology that I'm working with is have a blend of the two. When the two come together, you've got to have a dialogue that's going on between them. And how do you get that dialogue? You've got the restrictive Saturn and you've got the expansive Jupiter. How do the two come together? And it seems to me that the hermit is quite a good character for bringing them together, because it's a more contemplative, it's a deeper meaning, and it's kind of slowing things down. So the hermit's associated with time, the passing of time as well, but it's also associated with a more enlightened approach to things, looking out on horizons, traveling down the path of the soul, or the path of consciousness. And so we skip here just to, I threw these two slides in because I think I've talked on them before, but it's really just about Saturn and Jupiter, depending where you've got them in your chart, often govern health aspects as well in individuals and in people in general. And you can see that there's a positive emotion cycle, if you like, and some of the organs are ruled by Saturn and some of them are ruled by Jupiter, but the one that you probably know most about is the liver here, and that's a Jupiterian organ. The liver's one of these organs that, if you know your mythology, Prometheus, who stole the fire of the gods, was punished by Jupiter he chained him to a rock, and they sent down an eagle every day to peck out his liver. But the liver is a regenerative organ, so every day the liver would grow back so that the punishment would continue. And I think it was only when Atlas came along to relieve Prometheus that he escaped from this cycle of regeneration, death and regeneration. So it's a very kind of Jupiterian concept there. And on the other side of that, you've got a Saturnian organ that people probably don't know too much about, but the health people in this group probably will do. It's the spleen. And the spleen is said to be quite a Saturnian organ, and it's quite important to kind of keep the health of the spleen. It's on the opposite side to your liver, so the spleen's on your left-hand side, the liver's on your right. And so these two are opposites in a sense, and of course all of them need to work together. You know, you've got the cycle is the heart above, the spleen down here, and then the lungs, large intestine. They actually go together. There's pairs of organs. The kidneys and bladder go together, and it's a very watery kind of system, if you like. And up here, the liver and gallbladder goes together. Now, interesting enough, the liver is the Jupiterian aspect of it, but the gallbladder is the bitter part of it, that is the Saturnian organ. So gallstones are a thing created by a placement of Saturn in your chart. So it's an accumulation of material in your gallbladder, or your gallstones, as they call them. And so, you know, these things are kind of important because medical astrology looks at all these aspects in people's charts and tries to kind of get people to be a bit more positive about smiling. This is part of this talk about the inner smile, smiling into these internal organs to kind of make an association between health and happiness. So I've got quite a few of these extra slides. You know, we could sort of probably discuss and people could comment on. But yeah, I'll put this other 3 one. This is the 3 of Wands in here. And while the 3 is associated, as I said, with Saturn, because it's a kind of merchant type of figure looking out onto the sea here and watching this progress of his ships, it's kind of, you know, it's got a Jupiter element to it. So yeah, a lot of kind of interpretive symbolism in these two links between the cards. Now this one, yeah, so what have we got here? Yeah, I mean, people could unmute themselves if you want to say anything about these cards and the ideas as we go on. You just unmute yourself and say. But you know, so you've got the 3 of Cups here and the 2 cups behind him, comprising the figure of the 5 of Cups. So the storyline, if you remember, we look back at the 3 of Cups, and the 3 of Cups was this celebration of people, the 3 graces, if you like, dancing in a circle. Now that celebration has come to an end, and there's been a sorrow or a loss, and you see these 3 cups of spilt. So the figure, the dark Saturnian figure here, is looking down on these 3 cups, you know, with a loss of joy. And, you know, it's a kind of realizing that, you know, there's been good times and these good times are over, sort of thing. So it's a sadness, a time of sadness, a time of loss, but you feel that you want to tap the person on the shoulder and say, well, you've still got 2 full cups behind you, you know, so, you know, it's not all loss. And so this kind of concept of the 3 spilled cups and the 2 bright cups, you can imagine you are the person in the middle. So is it a cup half full that you're looking at, or is it a cup half empty? And that's kind of part of where your philosophy comes in. And the person or the planet that governs your philosophy is Jupiter. So look in your chart, see where Jupiter is, and you'll kind of start to pick up on what your philosophy is, whether it's a more outward going, outward looking, optimistic or overly optimistic philosophy, or whether it's ruled by a sort of Saturnian, more pessimistic philosophy. So when the 2 planets come together, this is what we're going to see throughout the year. You know, you're going to see things spilled, but behind you things full. You know, so you've got to kind of put yourself in this. And in the background here, you see there's this river, the river of life is flowing through from right to left here. And if you're going on a journey in these cards, you know, you might want to, after you've kind of looked at the situation and evaluated it, you would probably go and cross this bridge across the river and start exploring the terrain on the other side and just see what's out there. So that's a kind of Jupiter journey. And it's also a Saturnian journey, because it's what it's teaching you is kind of understanding your situation, understanding where you are, understanding your role or your purpose in life, which is a kind of Saturn realization sort of thing. So yeah, I think the tarot and the mythology can teach us a great deal about the planetary alignments. This is another really favorite card here. So yeah, what do people see in that? You see you've got a figure here. She's blindfolded. She's tied down. She's out on this castle, and it might be the castle from the previous card. You never know. But she's out in low water here. And so to her right, there's the 3 swords that are sticking into the ground here. And to her left, there's the other 5 swords there that are still she's dealing with, you know. So again, it's these 3 swords, the loss or sorrow or experience that she's had, but she's actually not tied to anything. She can get up and walk away from the situation. And it's which way she goes from here. So again, it's this Saturn-Jupiter concept of the 2 values, the 2 oppositions. And yeah, so, you know, in tarot, it doesn't get any kind of further down the track than the 10 of Swords here. So, you know, you've got the 10 of Swords, and a lot of people say, well, there can't be much after that. You know, he's got all these swords stabbed in his back. So, but you know, the thing in the tarot is what is after this, and the thing is, although the sky's dark above him, and all these problems and issues have been, you know, have been causing him great discomfort, shall we say? But the horizon is bright. You know, there's yellow, and is looking out to this horizon that's beyond the ocean there. So there's still, the 10 is as much as you can get in the sword, so it's the next stage, and that's what this kind of planetary alignment's about. It's looking on to the next stage of development here. Again, another 10, you know, the 10s are associated a lot with Saturn, so it's this idea of burdens. You're carrying this burden, but what the 10 of Wands here is carrying, he's carrying all these trees or wands that can be planted, you know. So it's like planting this forest for the future, this idea of the green revolution or the new Green Deal is kind of very much apart from this, the Saturnian burdens. It's not going to be an easy shot in getting the earth sorted out by just planting trees, but you know, the idea is that you're moving on with this conscious effort to make a change. Again, another one of the Hermit here, and that shows the kind of time, the winter solstice light that he's got in his lamp there, waiting for things to kind of settle down. Oh yeah, there it is. Now that's Newgrange. For those of you that, I'm sure a few of you have been to Newgrange, you know, the alignment here, this is the light box that's right in front of it. And yeah, it's just a fascinating place, Newgrange, with this chamber that runs up into the centre of the mound, and you can walk up into this sort of central chamber, and the light will travel up at midwinter and reach that centre chamber, and everything changes from there on. So it's that kind of importance of the solstice that we're looking at. You know, you could do a whole series of things on Newgrange. It's just such a fascinating place. So what we're talking about here, we're talking about a change from the heavy Saturnian, Capricornian energies into a different feeling of Aquarius. So Aquarian energies, if there's Aquarian people here, you know, this is going to be the next 2.5 years or 3 years is going to be Saturn in your sign, and the next year is going to be Jupiter in your sign. So things, you know, very big changes for Aquarius, but not just Aquarius, it's where Aquarius is also in everybody's chart. So Aquarius is this water pouring figure, and it's ruled again by Saturn. But Jupiter is more comfortable in Aquarius than it was in Capricorn, because Aquarius is a more free thinking type of place. And if you're looking for figures, you know, I was thinking, well, who are the Jupiterian figures that have recently come to light in this dark period in world politics, because Saturn and Capricorn are about politics. And, you know, you've got the end of the Trump era, which has been a very Saturnian, Capricornian sort of dark period, if you like, the darker side of things. And, you know, Joe Biden, the new incumbent, has come in, and he's a kind of, he has the potential to be a very Jupiterian or Saturnian Jupiterian figure, making a lot of changes in the way the world moves and changes its ideas and concepts. So yeah, there's really big changes coming this year, and it'll be interesting to see how they unfold. Yeah, the whole mythology of Saturn is kind of about things being cut off and things. This is Saturn and Cronus, as I say, are the same kind of characters, but they're also related to the Promethean or the Uranus figure, who's the figure lying on the ground. And in mythology, all these old gods they swallow their children. You know, they're worried about their children taking over their role as kingship. And so you have this mythology about Uranus swallowing the children, and then his wife hatching this plan to get Kronos, who's the figure with the Saturn sickle here, to cut him open and let the children free. You know, so it's this freeing of ideas in Aquarius that's happening. And of course, Jupiter does the same sort of thing. There's a lot of, you know, Jupiter or Zeus is really the son of Saturn or Cronus. You know, so it's this kind of paternal or paternalistic link that runs through it. There is a goddess side to it, of course, as well. And it's more valuable to look that up and see where it comes, because in Kabbalah, this one here, I don't know if you can see, I can enlarge that a bit, I think. Yeah. So this is the Kabbalistic image here, and up on the top here, on the top left, we've got, I don't know if I can move that down a bit. Yeah, I can. That's Bina, and it's about, she is the Saturnian kind of link. I'll just enlarge it quite a bit more and bring it down if I can. Maybe not. Okay, now maybe it doesn't go. Okay, that looks about as far as I can get it. Okay, so this is the great mother Bina in Kabbalah, and it's about understanding, and it's only reached by all these difficult journeys or path workings, and the planet that it's in conjunction with. So Bina represents Saturn up here, and is really the deeper part of it. The meaning of Saturn is about understanding. And Jupiter is this other figure down here, this other sphere called Hesed, and it's the sphere of mercy or kindness or openness, expansion type of thing. So it's the journey between the two, or the conjunction of these two forces, that's kind of important. And as I said, in mythology, you get the the dark side as well as the bright side. But in astrology, you would have Saturn up here, one of the malefics, because it puts you through difficulties, and Mars would be down below it here, Gevura, and it's one of the other malefics. But on the other side, you would have Jupiter, which is one of the benefics in astrology, and down below it, Venus, another one. So these are they're two of the brightest stars in the sky. Whereas Saturn's not quite as bright, but it can be seen, and I don't know if everybody's aware of it at the moment, but the most prominent red star in the middle of the south sky, high in the south at the moment, is Mars. And Mars has been ruling the entire year. So all these drastic happenings from this year have been kind of quite related to Mars. Mars has been in the sign of Aries for most of the year, and it's only just finished a retrograde period in Aries during this very restrictive lockdown, virus spread and all the rest of it, and it's now almost completed its journey in Aries. So Mars will come out of Aries and into Taurus in early January, and so you'll feel a change of energies. There's things settling down and things moving forward a bit, and that might be because the virus is more under control, or the vaccine is having a more positive effect on those that are using it, or this control group that's spreading it, or whatever. But it's more likely to be a more settled period for after January. Maybe not quite as drastic as we would have had it been. So I'm just going to run back through some of these ones to get to one or two of the ones that I wanted to stop on. Yeah, that one there seems to sum up what this conjunction is about. We're not getting overly excited about it just because Jupiter's there. We're there's been a lot of losses this year. People will have lost, people feel that they've lost time. I've heard people say it's been a wasted year. Actually, for a lot of us, probably, and yourselves, it's been a very busy year and a very productive year. So it's how I put a few questions here to kind of put to ourselves, is how do you value your time? Do you see this year as a positive, or do you see it as a negative? Do you see yourself as having wasted time, or have you made better use of time? Do you see, Jupiter's about happiness. Do you see yourself as being in charge of your own happiness? Or do you feel that others or other situations have been on top of your happiness and you haven't been able to express it so much? Jupiter's also about celebrating achievements, and Saturn is about achievements as well. So, have you celebrated your achievements this year? Have you looked at what you've achieved? Have you satisfied with your progress? Do you think you made any progress this year? Jupiter's also about your ideals and beliefs. So have your ideals changed? Have your belief system, has it changed? Is it opening up or closing down? So all these questions are kind of part of the year's appraisal, because everybody at the end of the year kind of sums up how they've done or how they think they've done. I'd like to open it up just now to questions, if that's okay. So that, or not questions, but observations, and you can go back to any points and put in any discussion points that you'd like. I can change this slide if you want.
Malcolm, last year you gave us a talk. I can't remember what exactly was happening, but you said it was a really important thing that only happened, like the Crimean War and other big things in the past. So maybe that's what happened with the virus coming along, being a very big influence this year.
Yeah, there's been a lot of, I mean, this year, this big conjunction that's happened just now has only been one of a number of major conjunctions. And the other conjunction that Saturn's been going through quite a big series of these things, and it was conjunct with Pluto, also in Capricorn. And Pluto's the lord of the underworld, and I never thought it was very powerful in my own chart, but these outer planets have major changes in people's lives. And so Pluto moved into Capricorn in 2008, and it'll stay there until 2023. So it's only got another 3 years in Capricorn, but that's quite a long time if you're affected by Pluto sort of energies. So it's a big changer, and the fact that it's been working with Saturn over the past year or two has been a major factor, and it's probably the one that's kind of heralded in a lot of the viral thing this particular time. But yes, there's key events, and it would take a while to sort of unfold them all, but that's a kind of key one that you mentioned. Yeah. So any Capricornians in the audience there? I see Duke there.
You know I am, yeah. But the things you say, Malcolm, about the change this year has been big for me because it's been good in a way. I've worked from home the whole time, which might sound really bad, but I've actually really enjoyed it. We've been really busy as well, so I'm quite thankful for that. Quite lucky as well. So
yeah. That's good, Doug. And I see, you know, it's quite interesting what people have in the background of their Zoom. And, you know, it always sort of influences their sort of Zoom thing. So I see your library of books there, which is very kind of Saturnian, but also very Jupiterian, because a lot of people have these in their background of their Zooms, you know. And it's quite interesting that you know, how your philosophy is shaped, and how it shapes other people's philosophies as well. So it's a good Jupitership philosophy. Yeah.
which is changing as well. So that's quite interesting. So I think the unknown for me is like what's going to happen after the 21st. It's still a bit vague to me as to how that change is going to come in.
Yeah. I think things happen quite quickly in Aquarius. There's a series of rapid changes, and it's often, Aquarius is known for its reversals. So often things appear to go backwards quickly as well. And I know from, you know, because I'm involved in a lot of the climate change stuff, I know that a lot of the stuff that was closed down by Trump, and that's many things to do with the climate and the Paris Agreement and things like that. Joe Biden is busy at the moment reversing all of these to bring America back on board with the Paris Agreement. And this is hugely influential in the philosophy of the other countries in the world, because then it becomes a sort of competition to see who can put more effort into, you know, cleaning up the fossil fuel debris, if you like, of the past Saturnian period, you know. So, and that's kind of, if you think about this past 200 years, past 100 and something years, you know, the thing, fossil fuels is Saturn. Fossil fuels is buried below the earth. Fossil fuels were never meant to be burned in the quantity that we burn them, you know, and this earthy round of you know, the Saturn trigons has been the kind of liberation of these fossil fuels, and that now has got to be reversed. You know, all fossil fuels have got to be stopped, and people think they've got 20 years to do it, but they've actually only got, you'd be lucky if they've got even 10 years to do it. You know, so if we're not on track within the next 5 to 10 years, the consequences for our children and grandchildren are not good at all. You know, so these are kind of huge life-changing circumstances. I mean, I don't know if other people have noticed it, but because we're always gardening, we do throughout the lockdown, we've been community gardening every day, and this has been the wettest winter. From August onwards, it's almost been wet every other day, and it's just been continuous wetness, wet, cold, you know, not good climate. So there are visible changes happening in people's environment, and it's going to be difficult to adapt to.
So how long have we got before Saturn starts interfering again?
Well, it's Saturn the cycle is between these air signs, you know. So this is us just in Aquarius at the moment. So the next 20-year spell, it will move into you know, from Aquarius into Gemini, and then it will move in the next 20 years from Gemini into Libra. So it'll continue this three air sign cycle. So
right.
all people with Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius planets or important parts of their charts will be more affected by it. So yeah, you've got the pattern of astrology is quite different. Jupiter will stay with Saturn throughout this 2021, but by the end of the year, it moves into the next sign, Pisces, whereas Saturn will stay in Aquarius for another 2 years. You know, so 2.5 to 3 years before it moves on. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. I think this year's astrology is 2021's astrology is going to be a bit softer than this year. Certainly, it's not got the same drama in it. Having said that, there are a lot more reversals that are going on as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, looking at that picture there, yes, it's very poignant, isn't it? That, like you said, to look, it's easy to see the things that have gone and you've missed, but then forget about what you have. So
yeah, what do you miss? You know, this is it. I mean, when Pluto moved into I've got Capricorn rising, so I do understand a lot of Capricornian energies. You know, it's a very strong part of my chart. So it's a very earthy part. I'm a Gemini, so Geminis are usually very up in the air, talkative, and do this and that. And it's the butterfly type of.
Yeah, I know.
Saturn is quite well placed in my chart, and I've got Capricorn rising, so it tends to bring things back down to the ground and look at the practical issues and how to kind of inform them better, structured, and look at things in a better way. But you know, having said that, the planets, you know, like I talked about this Saturn-Pluto conjunction earlier this year and before, and it was a major portent of change. So when Pluto changes signs, it's a big thing. And because I think it was 2008 when Pluto moved into my Capricorn space, that was the time that you know, a lot of big things changed for me. You know, so things like retirement sort of ideas, and my father was ill at that time and died shortly after that. You know, so a lot of big changes kind of happen in people's lives when these things come in. You know, and it's how you deal with these changes. So do you see that loss as these 3 cups spilled over, or do you look back and say, well, he was 82 or 83 or whatever, and yeah, you had a good long time, and it was okay, you know. So it's kind of how you evaluate death and passing and things like that. That's more important, I think.
You can always refill the cups. Just because they're spilt doesn't mean they have to stay spilt.
That's true, Joyce, and it's a good one, that, because there's a goodly source of water right beside you to do it.
Absolutely, there's plenty of it ever flowing right there.
Yeah,
like you said, it's been very wet this year.
Yeah,
we've got just everything we need. It's amazing. I've found this past year to be absolutely a total gift. It's been absolutely something totally unexpected, and just a place where one can, without interruption, just spend time getting into your own psyche and meditating and finding out what's really going on. And you know, it's a lot of it for me has been about recognizing that the more I focus on what's gone wrong in the past, the slower my progression is. And the more that I focus on what I want to see, how I want to see my world, it just materializes in front of me.
Yeah, that's good, Joyce. It's like that thing from In Course of Miracles and in Louise Hay's book, that you know, there is all the time in the world to do all the things I would like to do, you know, and it's a good sort of thing to look at, how you evaluate time and how you use things.
Yeah, we've all got the same amount of time. It's what we do with it, isn't it?
It is.
How do we use it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I see nothing but good on the horizon.
That's good, Joyce. Yeah, that is good.
And it's been an amazing year in many ways. There's, like you said, there's so many positive things that happened as a result of the lockdown. Just in the short term, anyway, the way people are appreciating the natural life world much better now. I think that's opened many people's eyes to it. You know, they can hear the birds sing and see the sky and clear air. So it has made a big impact for you know, the whole planet, I think, in that respect.
Yeah, so it's been a kind of change of consciousness. You're right, Damien. It's and I think this change of consciousness is kind of the theme of where we're moving into at the moment. That at the end of the year, after the solstice, people's consciousness is shifting, partly because the planets are shifting as well, but you know, they're just indicators of your consciousness. And you know, so people are having to develop a strategy to move on and deal with circumstances rather than to lament about, you know, not dealing with them type of thing. So it's this how to turn inaction into action and how to turn kind of words into action type of thing. That's very important.
Yeah, I think to being aware, becoming more aware of the thoughts you think and the repercussions of the thoughts you think.
Yeah, very much so. It's been easy this year to express the Mars energies, which is the frustration of it being in Aries. So, you know, it's been easy to be angry with circumstances or frustrated with the lack of progress, or, you know, it's kind of, but there will be, you know, once it moves into Taurus is much slower moving. It's ruled by Venus. So Mars and Venus have got this kind of dialogue going on between them, and it's not always a totally smooth one, but you know, the dialogue changes and it becomes a little bit more constructive.
I'm thinking too, Malcolm, about the well, certainly I've been quite conscious of people talking about the values and principles and what that means, and quite a lot of opposing viewpoints on that. I think the Pluto energy bringing to the surface quite a lot of, you know, control issues and manipulation on the one hand, and yet there's Jupiter's calling for kind of well, that personal calling that people seem to be wanting to search for. Quite a lot of people talking about getting back to nature. The lockdown helped them go for more walks and do things like that, and they've suddenly noticed that there is the natural world out there. So all that's great, but there's quite a lot that I'm reading about and sensing where people are wondering what the true value system is. You know, what are we going to birth, I think, in the next, you know, in this next phase?
Yeah, that's a good point, Colin, because, you know, all of our economy and all of our ideas so far in kind of Western history anyway have been based on growth, economical growth, or growth of this or growth of that, you know, and everything's got to grow. But Jupiter is growth and expansion, but when it comes in contact with Saturn, that growth is limited. So you can't have continuous growth, at least of where resources are concerned. You can't keep extracting, you can't keep burning, you can't keep, you know, so all these things, this limitation that's being placed on that is a good point. It's a kind of reassessment of your values and what is valuable to you and how you use these resources in a more positive way. Yeah, you're right, not just growth.
Because I think it's also interesting how politics has been quite, obviously it's always a very controversial area, but I think people are getting really quite sick of the same old kind of thing with it. They're wanting another way of seeing things, and a lot of frustration with the old order still trying to keep the way it was, and this new principle probably coming from the people. I mean, when it going into Aquarius, I think is going to be a lot more about community values and about what really people's wanting to see around them. And I think politicians are not really seeing to that, answering that.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, politicians are very quite Saturnian figures as well, you know. And so,
some will, but a lot, I think people are still finding it quite difficult with how it's been. It's maybe this, I don't know, but maybe this pandemic has highlighted the ones that are progressive and the ones that are just, I don't know, dancing in the dark kind of thing.
yeah, I think we've got to be aware of, you know, the less than positive dialogue that goes on about things getting back to normal, because the thing is that normal wasn't okay. You know, getting back to normal isn't a good sign, you know, so it's kind of move forward. Yeah.
Well, I think on Radio 4 they had the Reith lectures. I think they have them every year. And it was this year, it was given by the guy who was the governor of the Bank of England before he left. And it was remarkable because he started to talk about values and how we have to remove that away from money. And so I think, yeah, even up in the high up places, it is making a big influence on. So that gives me some hope that we can change, and we will change.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, when people like that start talking in terms of more kind of spiritual values, things are really starting to change there. Yeah, so that's.
I think that Mark Carney's always been a bit. He's always been a bit more sort of open to things, you know, in some ways, and that's maybe what made him quite attractive to a lot of people, you know, because of his ideas. But I'm also thinking about the fact that some people are panicking. You know, today I heard 3 or 4 stories about one man who was in hospital. He was sectioned, and constantly trying to take his life, you know. And so I suppose that there are people who are quite confused, and obviously if they're on heavy medication, you know, they're kind of doped, so they can't actually think through things. So it's almost as though if you've, over the past 20, 30 years, if you have had difficulties in life, but you're not fallen into the mainstream of things, it's been a good thing, you know, because one has been able to sort of look at what's going on. Whereas people who actually just swallowed the pill, you know, and sort of been part of society in a big way, kind of sold their soul a wee bit, then they're finding it difficult, I think, because obviously they're losing work. Maybe they did, you know, and they're losing income. So there's a sense that how do the people who actually can see things forward work with the people who are actually panicking, you know, finding it difficult?
Yeah, that's a difficult one, Heather. I think it's again, you know, the person that's kind of, as you say, you know, going through these traumas. It sounds like a very Saturnian thing. So their freedom, which is Jupiter, is being restricted, which is Saturn, and it's how to get that dialogue going between the two in your own consciousness, and that's kind of, I mean, that's what alternative practitioners effectively do. Okay, I do it through art and imagery, astrology, and that sort of thing. But you know, I'm sure the dowsers and the alternative therapists do it in a similar type of way. You try to start a dialogue that allows the person to understand where they are and how to move a bit more freely within the confines of where they find themselves, and you know, how to change their medication in a gradual way so that it's accepted by, you know, authorities and the individual. It's not making sort of radical shifts, it's making structured, controlled shifts, perhaps, maybe.
Well, that's where it's going to be very interesting to see, just because to some extent people on the alternative health scene have not been supported by you know, the NHS or people with a lot of money. You know, the pharmaceuticals have been very much against this type of thing because they're not going to make any money from it. So it'd be interesting to see just how the breakdown, because things are breaking down. You know, the old order is breaking down. That's part of the Aquarian thing as well. And so it's how you shift your view, you know, from one to the other. And you're right that there's so much happening on a community level just now, which is really quite inspired, actually, you know, to sort of people are, and perhaps people wouldn't have been able to do that if things had been similar to previous, you know, years. But this year has really kind of shifted everything about in a major way, I think, you know, sort of so it's enabling these things to happen.
Yeah, you're right, Heather. And I think, you know, just looking at the astrology unfolding, Aquarius, as people have mentioned, is about group consciousness, about community efforts, friends, and kind of gatherings, getting together, and that sort of thing. And the fact that Saturn's there, well, Saturn is the ruler of Aquarius. It's the traditional ruler of Aquarius. So there's still likely to be restrictions on this for some time to come. It's not going to be a sort of panacea where everything's suddenly lifted, but just like we're using Zoom just now, I think there's adaptations that people will make to accommodate that. I mean, I think people are going to be it's about like Christmas coming up here, and you know, everybody's partly keen to see their family, but at the same time they're a bit reticent about doing so because they know that, you know, it might lead to poorer circumstances and that sort of thing. So it's how to get the balance of that, and that's kind of where we're going in this period, certainly of the spring, where there's a lot of change coming up.
Talking of balance, you mentioned Kepler, and Kepler, of course, in his thick book, an inch and a half thick book, chapter 4 was him being concerned to understand how the planets affected the weather. But right through the book, he believes in the Earth soul, that the Earth soul could experience the aspects of the planets. And I'm wondering if the reality of science now is going to have to change. Our reality of science is going to have to change. And it might change back to what the Keplers and even Newton with his alchemy had, well, they would never have used the word spiritual, but they had underlying realities, underlying views of their world, which are quite different than the modern quantifiable science. Is reality of science going to change, Malcolm?
Yeah, well, I think we can't fight against big pharma, etc., because that just gives it more power. Everything is vibration, and so those of us who are aware of the fact that everything is vibration know that when we come together with the perception of wholeness and emit that vibration, that has a far greater effect. And the thing is that we want everything to happen because we're so used to having everything happen today or this minute. We want it now, but everything has a season, you know, and some seeds take a long time to germinate. And it's really, from my perspective, it's not up to me to want the world to change. It's up to me to change how I perceive my world, how I see my world, and to have patience with it and to love it into change, to be kind towards those who, you know, the Donald Trumps and the big pharma, etc., you know, to just emit kindness towards those large entities, because that's the only thing that can really shift their vibration. That's my perspective.
No, that's good, Joyce. That is very good. Yeah, and I think that probably will be realised. You know, I think. Yeah, I mean, the vaccine. You know, the vaccine's very interesting in astrology terms because there's been so many different attempts to get it, and they've managed to get these effective things within a year because of the money and the time and effort that they put into it. But I mean, what is the vaccine? You know, and what's it? How's it going to do? How's it going to make the changes? You know, if we're relying on a technological thing to make the changes, you're right. That's not really going to give us the results that we want. Acceptance or non-acceptance of the vaccine is kind of one of these things. You know, a lot of people feel that it's inappropriate, and a lot of people conversely feel that that's going to solve all their problems. You know, so it's interesting because the vaccine, this particular one, the Pfizer vaccine, has a messenger tied in it, this mRNA messenger, and the messenger is Mercury. And it's interesting, in astrology, Mercury is the messenger. He's the go-between.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, he's the one that kind of goes down to the underworld and negotiates things and comes back up. And you know, he's the kind of the one that gets a few things sorted out. So, and yet a lot of people have got this kind of fear of the messenger, you know, which is interesting, and maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing. But the messenger is interesting because along with the sun moving in at the winter solstice in a week's time, Mercury also moves into Capricorn. So the message is a very kind of practical, pragmatic, down to earth. Yeah, this is kind of the answer type of thing. Yeah. So it's kind of looking at the practical problems of things like distribution. And I've just been studying a bit of that. And basically, the first world, that is America, ourselves, Europe, and all the wealthy countries, have managed to grab 80% of the vaccines available to the world. And it leaves the poorer half, the global south, and the bulk of the world with 20% of the available vaccines for that huge part of the population. So this imbalance is just, well, it's unacceptable, but it is the same imbalance that we see in the climate change, that the developed countries like ourselves have historically done the most damage through the empires and the waste of resources, and it's to the detriment of the global south, who have done the least damage, and they're the suffering the most. So it's how to balance this sacrifice or the suffering, and that's where the Saturn bit is. Saturn is the suffering. So the global north will have to tighten its belt. It will have to suffer consequences of its actions over this period.
Yeah. The old adage, as we sow, so shall we reap.
I'm afraid so. Yeah. It's interesting.
Apparently, Malcolm, the chart for the first administration of the vaccine in the UK, which some think it's the actual first in the world because we got the thing, is if you go into YouTube, Steve Judd, that's Judd, does a video on it, and apparently it's quite some chart.
Wow, that's interesting.
So it's got a grand cross in it with 28 or 29 degrees Scorpio rising.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you want the time of it, I don't know if you know the time, do you want it?
Yeah, good. Yeah.
Yeah, apparently it's 6:31 a.m.
Yeah. December
the 8th in Coventry, and it was given to a 90-year-old woman.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
So you can kind of have a look at that chart. Steve's had a look at it, and it's only a kind of brief, a brief video, but it's challenging. It's a challenging chart. Very challenging.
That's great. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It'd be interesting to look at her chart more than the chart of the vaccine, actually.
Yeah. Well, Steve kind of looked at only that. I'm afraid he didn't. Obviously, I don't think you can. I don't know how he would get the women's chart, but certainly he kind of got the actual chart for when she was given it. So
yeah,
he sees this as quite a significant chart, but we shall see.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, 1930. Oh, yeah, yeah. Because I mean, a lot of what there's a lot of research still to be done on this, but if you go back in 20-year chunks, or if you go back in larger time spans, if you look at on the bigger cycles that we were talking about, these are about 200-year cycles where Saturn and Jupiter go through this series of conjunction in the 4 different signs. So in order to get through all the signs, it would take like 200 years per group of signs, if you like. So 800 years to go through the 4 elements. And so if you go back, I've got some of them that are listed here. The last time it was in the air signs is between 1186 and 1406. And so it's coming into that same sort of period now. And so that would be 40 cycles of this 20-year period. And that takes us to the first dip into the air signs, which was really 1981. And then, from then on, it's going to be all air for the next couple of 100 years. So it's quite interesting, that. Yeah. And just maybe even to compare the history of what's going on then, who was around and what kind of things were happening. Yeah, I've got hundreds of notes written here, but I had to edit them severely. Yeah, just I thought it'd be better sticking to the images than going through all the notes here. Yeah.
Wasn't the 12th century when the early medievals in Western Europe conceived of the concept of analysis?
Yeah, well, yes, to a large extent it was, but then there's the Arab period. I'm actually it's a bit ridiculous. I'm starting to go into ridiculous areas of Arab history here now, because they preclude a lot of the Enlightenment period. and their star sign astrology and astronomy is quite remarkable because it takes you back even further. And you get into the Ptolemaic period as well, and then the Hellenistic period. So there's just a huge amount of information that's available just now, and there's some really good astrology podcasts that are online just now for free. One of them is a chap called Chris Brennan, and he runs an astrology podcast every week, and it takes you in. Some of them are quite deep, but the other one is a more psychological, softer approach. Is an American lady called Molly McCord, and she's got a series of YouTube ones, but she's on every other day. Molly McCord, very, very good astrology. Chris Brennan, Molly McCord, and another lady called Kelly Surtees. She runs a lot of good stuff. So you can do you can dip into their stuff and get a feel for daily, weekly, monthly changes and how they're affecting you in person rather than just things in general. So it's very helpful, but it's more helpful to understand your own astrology chart and where things are moving in it and what's coming to the light and not coming to the light type of thing. But yeah, there's a lot of good information out there, and of course you can go on live meetings as well with the Zoom and things like that. So it's quite exciting. Yeah. I'm just looking at one particular here. The last great conjunction, just going back to 1583 in the water signs. Now that was at the time kind of Kepler sort of period, I think, and Tycho Brahe. So they were kind of speculating on the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction of that time because it was about to change from the water signs. It had spent 200 years in the water signs, and it was about to change into the fire signs in 1603. So there was a huge, big enlightened discussion, and it became a great topic of conversation for about 20 or 30 years. And in actual fact, it was such a big thing in the Catholic Church that the Pope issued a papal bull condemning or banning divination, astrological divination at that time, because it was interfering with the church remits, so so we could be up to that again. So yeah, and it takes you back. One of the other things, 1226 I've got here as a notable time that it was observed in this same proximity. So 1226, it could be observed on the ground like we're able to observe it just now. It's going into the setting sign, but that's the period 1226. But it was only observed by eye then, because telescopes weren't invented till, I think it's 1643 or something like that, later on. So, and then they started making telescopic observations of the planets. So yeah, interesting stuff. Mm-hmm. Just run back. Yeah. So probably a good time to look up your mythology on Zeus, Jupiter, and check what's happening, and then just do a bit on research on some of the other characters, Saturn, that type of thing. Yeah.
Well, that was great, Malcolm. Lots of things for us to think about.
Yeah, that's good, David. We'll see if we can give you an update next year on how things went.
Yeah, this time next year we can all be together, maybe.
Yeah, that's a possibility. Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah.
No, that was fantastic talk. Lots of big topics there.